Hello everybody and welcome back to Uber Studios. You may notice that the video looks a little bit different today. I switched out a lens, which I thought might look cool, but maybe I'll play with it and maybe switch it back, maybe I won't. If you like this look, mention it in the comments, and if you hate this look, then shut up. Today we're talking about Adam and Eve, and we're going to talk about what I thought this story meant when I was an active Mormon, the role that this story had in my deconversion, and what I think about this story now. I want to throw out a caveat right now. Whenever I'm talking from this room, or into this microphone, or into that camera, I'm not prescribing a worldview on anybody, okay? I'm describing my own worldview. So if I say something and you say, well, that won't work for me because XYZ, then hey, I'm with you. I think that you know yourself better than I know you, and that sounds great to me. If I say something and you like it, then cool. We share a worldview, That's all that is. I'm just talking from my own experience here. I'm just talking about the way that these stories have affected me and the way that I'm trying to make it right logically right now. So if you're here for that, if you like that, then great. If you think that's stupid, then cool. I don't care. Okay, so I'm going to back up here and say that Adam and Eve is an incredibly important piece of Mormon theology. It's the only thing that you focus on when you're doing your endowment. You're walking through the fall with Adam and Eve, and you're learning alongside them how to make it right and what God has planned to make it right. And that's the whole temple ceremony, right? That's the endowment. To say that this is kind of a moot point as far as LDS theology goes would be not true. This is important doctrine. And if you read 2 Nephi 2, you can kind of see the way it's actually it's a good bit of reading to really dive into exactly what Mormons think about this. So if you've never been a Mormon before, I'll put a link to 2 Nephi 2 and you can read through that. I will say this. When I was a Mormon, this whole story was kind of vague to me because it was like, okay, so God creates this place and he puts Adam in it, and then he realizes that Adam is alone, which you would think God would have known before he put him in there that men shouldn't be alone, if God was just replicating plans that had been done in other worlds. You would think that he would know already that men and women have to be together, especially if God already has a wife, which is part of Mormon theology. Just throwing that out there right now. If God already has a wife, then the fact that he just made Adam and dropped him in the garden and then was like, cool, is kind of strange to me if you think about it. But anyway, so then he puts a deep, profound sleep over Adam, which enabled him to take the rib out of Adam and create Eve. And then he asked Adam to name everything. So Adam names the plants, the trees, and then he names Eve because she is the mother of all living. So then they are in the garden for a while. It's an undetermined amount of time. It's not really relevant how long they are there, but they're there long enough for a serpent to come and convince Eve to eat this fruit that God told them not to eat. And then somehow that makes them mortal. And then God says, because you disobeyed me, now I need to kick you out of here. But it's okay because I've created a path by which you will be able to return to me. This is what you learn in the temple. So far, I haven't said anything new, really. So when I was a Mormon, the thing that I always remember focusing on in lessons and seminary teachers bringing up was this interaction that takes place between God and Adam and Eve right after they eat the fruit. So he says, he calls to them and they hide, right? And we were told we hide from God because we have shame for our sins. His gaze pierces into our soul and it makes us feel like we made a mistake. And then God comes down and he says, I called you. Why were you hiding? How do you know that you're naked? And then God says, did you eat the fruit that I told you not to eat? And this was always presented as some great act of justice. wow, isn't God so great? He gives us a chance to confess, right? Why would he ask a question that he already knows the answer to? And the response to that was typically he wants to give Adam a chance to do the right thing here, which if you look at the next verse, doesn't really happen. Adam says something like, it was the woman and you gave her to me, right? So blames the woman and then blames God for giving him the woman. So not super chivalrous on that one, Adam, if I'm being honest. So to me, this is always the way that this story was presented. Every time I went to the temple, I felt like, okay, I want to get more out of this. And then I never really felt like I got any more than that. Just kind of like plot points on a story, right? Like I can retell the story really well now because I've done it so many times. But this story had a really, really important place in my recognizing that the church wasn't what it claimed to be for me, and that I no longer wanted to be a part of it because I no longer thought that it was true. Mormons teach that Adam and Eve is a literal part of world history. There will be some Mormons in the comments, I'm sure, who say that that's not true. That is kind of today's version of Mormonism that is kind of covering up those tracks. It was originally taught as a literal part of world history. The church actually teaches that we are all ancestors of Adam and Eve. And this was difficult for me to wrap my brain around because I couldn't understand how this many people would come from only two people. And this is a similar issue with Noah, but we're going to skip it for Noah because if we address it here, we don't have to address it with Noah ever again. And actually, we don't have to address it with Nephi and his family ever again because not enough people come. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. So it became a struggle for me to understand how 8 billion people could come from two people, because that would mean that a lot of siblings and a lot of cousins would have to have relationships with one another that usually don't promote high populations, if you're understanding where I'm coming from. In fact, I came across an article, which I will put in the notes. It's from nature.com. It's the gold standard as far as medical and scientific journals are concerned. Nature is about as good as it gets. And what Nature says is if we wanted to populate Mars, we would need at least 110 people to go on that voyage and repopulate the planet. So if you notice, 110 people is a lot more than 2 people. And so that's a problem. This wouldn't have to be a problem if the church took a metaphorical interpretation of the story of Adam and Eve. But as I said before, and as I will reiterate now, Joseph Smith taught that the Garden of Eden was in Missouri. So that there's not a lot of room for metaphor there. When I realized that it can't be literal, but the very first prophet of this dispensation claimed that it was literal and then went one step further and said it's actually also here, then that starts to become a logical conundrum for me, and I couldn't hack it anymore. So the way that I understand the story now, so this is how I understand the story now, and it's actually pretty straightforward and simple. I think that maybe a lot of people would get on board with this interpretation. You'll notice that in the beginning of the story of Adam and Eve, they start as hunter-gatherers who are living off of the land. And they end the story as farmers. Those are the main plot points of this story. Human beings, at one point, after we were already farmers, maybe came across a group that was still hunter-gatherers, maybe had an old story about when we were hunter-gatherers, and we're just trying to fit these pieces together. How did we go from not living in homes but kind of roaming around depending on weather patterns and so forth? How did we go from that to this? When did we realize that there was a future that we could prepare for by farming? When did we realize that we are forever naked to the elements and that nature will never stop killing us? When did we realize all of this? And why did we start farming as a result of that? And I think that this myth does a beautiful job of answering those questions. It says, well, You used to live off the land, yes. And then, you know, there was a revelation that you had because of food, that the future was there and you always needed to prepare for it. And so you left that naive place that you were in, and you entered the world of pain and farming and preparation for tomorrow. I think that's what the story means now. So let me know in the comments if that makes sense to you. This is the way, again, this is the way that I interpret it, right? So it doesn't say anything about the way that anybody else has to do it. There's no way that you have to think about this story. This is just the way that I think about it. If you liked this video, if you liked the kind of analysis of scripture or whatever you want to call this, I have 2 videos that could be helpful, or maybe that you would also enjoy. One of them is how Noah built his ark, which I will put somewhere. And the other one is nihilism, optimism, and Tolstoy, which is also a fun video. So if you liked this, go check those out because you might actually like those too. I want to say thank you for everybody who has watched till this point. That's very nice of you. If you liked it, like actually hit the button that says that you like it. Share it with a friend, and yeah, I'll be back soon. So take care of yourselves.